Yeah, come on in. Come on in. Grab a chair. Another pot. Another pot. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you. It should be good.
Oh,
Okay, sit here. Okay, everyone, I'm just gonna mute, and then if you want to say something, then just unmute your mic, okay? Don't be shy. I'm the volume up loud. Okay, let's pray. Oh, heavenly King, thou comforter the Spirit of truth, who art everywhere and fillest all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life, come and abide in us, and cleanse us of every impurity, and save our souls, O good one. God bless you all. Make yourself at home. All right, we talked about faith, hope, and love. Or we talked about faith and hope. Now we're going to talk about love. Here, you can take one and pass that around. All the virtues support the other virtues. Faith supports hope, and then faith and hope will support love. We're going to talk about the pinnacle of the Christian life, which is love. But at the same time, we're going to talk about what love is not. Okay? What is love? Everyone has their own definition of what love is. I don't know if I have something that works here. Something like that. One second. This one. Love. Everyone has people in society, people in literature, poets, they all have their definition of what love is. And when we talk about love, we're talking about God Himself. God is love, it says in 1 John. So if we define love improperly, we're making a God of our own definition. Think about that. So if love equals warm, fuzzy feelings, we have now just made God warm, fuzzy feelings. If love equals constant attraction, whatever, however you want to define that. We've made God the object of some kind of earthly constant attraction. If love equals, motherly care, then now we've just defined that God's love is motherly care. So we have to be a little careful in identifying or defining what love is, because then we can put it in a box and we could say, oh, you love me because you do this. I don't think you love me because I don't have warm, fuzzy feelings anymore, right? We see that in our culture. Oh, love equals whatever, loyalty, whatever it is. Well, you're not loyal to me anymore, so therefore I can't love you. Whatever it is, we come up with our own definition of what love is. And then when someone doesn't meet that, then we cast them out of our life, perhaps. So in order to get a better definition of love, the theological way to do this is to ask ourselves, what is not love? What is not love? Let's start there. And then when we talk about what love is not, then maybe we can find what love is. If you want to, you can follow along in the pamphlets if you have one. Love is not isolation. Okay, feel free to ask questions as we go because this is very important. This is Elder Simeon Kaggeropoulos. He is a really wonderful modern elder who reposed many years ago. But he started a monastery on the north side of Thessaloniki, Greece, and he's a revered spiritual father. This is what he says in this book, which I highly recommend. if you're more psychologically inclined to read this. He says, closing in on ourselves, running away from others, which is an illness and which is characterized today by psychologists as one of contemporary man's illnesses. So a running away from others, right, is an illness, isolation. Here's what he says on page 77. Allow me to say that it's not only probable, but certainly that a great many people in contemporary society are isolated, closed in on themselves. That's the definition he's using for isolated, closed in on themselves. A great many people who live in big and small cities and who continually have good times together, continually come and go together, continually have discussions and profess to fear that by chance they might find themselves alone in some deserted place and may harm society. And the final analysis, they're alone, they're closed in on themselves and deprived of true love. So what love is not is isolation, closed in on ourselves. It's gonna get better, don't worry.
Father,
Yeah, please.
2 more handouts.
Oh yeah, I think I maybe didn't print out enough.
Okay,
So if you guys can share, that would be
Yeah,
great.
that's fine.
That'd be wonderful. Thanks, Justin. He says on page 78, but they withdraw into themselves. They become enclosed in themselves. They isolate themselves from others and destroy themselves. A great many people, both men and women, suffer from this illness in our days. I would say they are afflicted by it. Any comments on that? So love is not a self-enclosed isolation, running away from people, locking myself up in the shell of my own heart. If there's any thoughts or comments, please don't be shy.
But don't we hang out with people all the time on the internet, on social media? We're surrounded by people.
So even when we're enclosed within ourselves, we're still surrounded with people.
Yeah,
Yes,
not really the same thing though, right?
right. Because you're saying like on Facebook, if we
Yeah.
isolate ourselves, but we're interacting with people on our screen.
I have hundreds of friends, right? And it's not really the same thing.
It's not
actually
the same.
Being with people.
Or as we'll see later, he's going to define how to have people enter into our hearts. See, this is really what we're talking about. What love is allowing people to enter into our heart and for us to go into their heart. But when we're closed, when we're isolated, it's me versus them. It's us versus them. It's, I must run away from them. Then that can cause affliction in our heart and in our soul. Because we can be closed in or isolated even from God. Listen to what he says, page 95. This type is the person who constantly needs solitude. He needs solitude so much that even before God, and please, let's pay special attention to this, he's afraid to open up. That is, even before God, he wants to remain alone. He is terrified of the truth that God sees everything and knows everything, that nothing escapes God and God's eye. This reality, this truth terrifies him, that it's possible for God's glance to fall inside his hiding place, inside his isolation, inside his shell, inside his confinement of his, and it's possible for God to know this and to know that. So even if we want solitude, right, we can be isolated from God. What does that look like to be isolated from God? Any thoughts? Yeah. Despondent. That could be a side effect of being isolated, certainly. But we're afraid to open up before God. We're afraid for God to see our heart. We're afraid for him to see inside of us. Go ahead.
I think, why would you be afraid to open up to God? I have trouble opening up to people
Right,
versus God.
right.
So,
So we're going to see there's 4 movements, really 3 movements that are unhealthy movements, which we're going to go over that we can see within ourselves. Not everyone struggles with isolation, right? Some people may have other things, but what we want to do is see the improper movement in our heart and then adjust that properly. So yeah, you're right. Opening up to other people, perhaps being more vulnerable or letting them into our hearts, right? But for some, not everyone, they can be closed in even before God. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we just look at Genesis then, because we start trying, isolating ourselves, we start trying to run away
Right.
from God, or even Jonah, try to flee from God.
Right.
Just that sin and that pride and the root.
Right. Exactly. We can see this in the very beginning, even in the garden with Adam, where God has given Adam an opportunity to repent. And he says, "Where are you? I miss you." And then Adam hides himself. So just be aware of this within our hearts, how we can isolate ourselves even before God, even when we're in solitude. Well, we say, what about the monk? He isolates himself, right? So is this a good thing or a bad thing? We can isolate in a good way. We can isolate in a not healthy way. So there are monks that isolate themselves in a beautiful and uplifting way, which we're going to see in just a second. And there are monks or nuns that isolate themselves in an unhealthy way.
Do you think vulnerability has anything to do with maybe the God opening up, or?
Definitely vulnerability, yeah. Especially what you got to trust that you got to trust someone. I mean, we're not gonna go to a stranger and tell them our life story and all that. Come on, that'd be crazy. So, although there's some people that do it, but there's going to be that trust factor of, okay, I know that you're all loving. I know you're all embracing. I know you're all forgiving. So this is why it's very good to get to know God, because God is that. God is all love. God is all gentleness. God is all forgiving. So knowing this or experiencing this first then helps us to open up. I mean, this is how relationships are developed. If you're with someone, a spouse, or even whoever else, it takes time to even open up. If you go on a first date and someone talks about all their, it's like a red flag, right? So again, that we want to have this opening up happens organically. It's natural. So let's talk about the monk with the good spiritual condition. I want us to see this. Says Elder Simeon, in contrast, the hermit isn't psychologically sick. He who escapes to the cliffs, to the caves, to a cell, or any way to a secluded monastery doesn't do it because he wants to enclose himself in himself and in this way reduce himself to nothing. He doesn't do it moved by an unhealthy disposition, by the unhealthy inner condition from which contemporary man suffers in the big cities. He does it because he has ascertained, at least for himself, that when he goes there, a certain window will open for him. A certain door will open for him with God's grace and assistance, both toward God and toward other people. See, the person that isolates themselves in prayer, the hermit, for example, is actually doing it to move toward other people. You see that? That's the trick right there. It's not for him to run and escape from people, but it's so that he can be alone with God to move toward other people. And we have such examples, concrete, tangible examples of hermits, ascetics, whose heart opened so wide where they took refuge that not merely do they have room for all men within them, but they actually do have all men within them. And they feel as the Apostle Paul did, who used to say about himself when he wrote to the Philippians that he has them within his heart. This is really the ticket. This is not sentimentality. It's not Hallmark language here. This literally is, we want to bring people into our heart. Well, I can't bring that person into my heart because of what he did to me or what that person did to me or whatever. No, the saint or the hermit in this case brings everyone within his heart, especially those who have wounded them, especially those who have hurt them. And so that we understand one another better, allow me to mention the case of a certain monk, whom I also mentioned at an earlier point. On the Holy Mountain in the place called Carulia. Carulia is if you look on pictures of Mount Athos, you'll see homes in the side of caves and cliffs. You have to take a rope and a chain to get up there, basically bring food up there. This is just my speculation, but I could be wrong. He may be talking about Saint Sophrony. Saint Sophrony lived in this area. And he's talking about us, and him and Saint Symphony talk about similar language, where the monks use chains to go up and come down, and whose diet consists more of wild figs than of bread or other foods. There was an ascetic who left the monastery where he was staying and came to that wild place, and he reached such a point of good spiritual condition that he kept praying with tears, not with ears, many hours in the daytime and many hours at night for God, listen to this, to take the whole world into paradise, even if he himself is to remain outside paradise. Soul love is not isolation. It's not being closed in ourselves. It's not a running away from people, but rather it's the enclosing of people within our heart. And the monk or the hermit actually encloses the whole world in their heart and wants the whole world to come into paradise, even if it means they do not go into paradise. Any questions on that? I want to make sure we understand this. Yeah. Definitely.
That's a way to avoid self-isolation.
Exactly. Because if you think about if we have an icky feeling for someone in our heart, our life is going to be dictated by that icky feeling. Meaning we're going to avoid certain roads. We're going to maybe go around their house. We're going to avoid certain things that maybe remind us of them, etc. So therefore, our destiny or our future is changed by the resentment that we have in our hearts. But if we can pray for them and love them when they come into our vision, into our heart, then our life changes. And we go on a totally different path. This probably 95% of Americans, if not more, deal with isolation. This is a huge illness. This might be the main illness in our day. Any questions or comments about isolation? I want to make sure we understand this, and we understand the remedy. Don't be shy. Right. Yeah, isolation. Well, this is coming from Do You Know Yourself, which is a great book. This is by Archimandrite Simeon Kageiropoulos. And it basically is, I'm basically paraphrasing what he's saying, but it's really beautiful, really self-revelatory. You're like, wow, because we all do this, we all isolate. And even if it's small, like avoiding someone in the supermarket, or not coming out of our house because we're afraid. Whatever it is, we isolate ourselves from people. We do this. And what he's saying is it's not bad to isolate. But what's the motivation? Is it so that we are not bothered by that person? Or that we don't have to, love them? Or is it, again, to bring everyone in our hearts? And I'll give you an example, if you have a conflict with someone, I don't know if you guys have ever had conflicts with anyone. Maybe you guys have just loved everyone. But if you ever have a conflict with someone, this is really how you get over it. It's really quite simple. You get in your icon corner, you do the sign of the cross, and you say, Lord, have mercy on, I'm just going to make up some name that doesn't exist so that, what's the Sesame Street? Snuffleupagus? What is it? Snuffleupagus. Lord, have mercy on Snuffleupagus, Lord, have mercy on Snuffleupagus. I can't even say it. And you can even do bows or whatever. Lord, have mercy on Snuffleupagus. You could even say, Lord, have mercy on me. You can add that as well. Lord, have mercy on Snuffleupagus. And the vision, the bad feelings of that person slowly go away. And something can transform is that when you see them next time, you actually may love them. And this has happened. You'll experience it where you're like, oh wow, I missed you. Where were you? That's the aim, is to not isolate ourselves, but to love everyone. And again, this is you experience this. I experienced this one time waiting for someone again on Mount Athol Square. He never met me. He never met me. I think I waited like 12 hours to see him or whatever. He never met me, but he gave me like the warmest, most fiery, most loving hug, It's like he doesn't know me, but he loves everyone. He loves the whole world. And so he's got me in his heart, even though he's never met me. Does that make sense? So there's no preconceived notions of judgment. It's no like, oh, he's got a wacky beard, so what's going on with him? None of that. There's no judgment on his part at all. It's just love. That's the way to live. That's paradise, What love is not, number two? Number one, it's not isolation. Number two, it's not being a good person. Shock to you, Christianity is not about being a good person. I'm supposed to wait for questions. My father, I thought it's supposed to be about being a good person.
And this is just by the premise that that's by the premise. Not saying bad person if you're living by the premise.
We don't want to be a bad person.
No.
But in this case, we can be a good person and hide behind being a good person. Oh, I'm a good person. I'm
Egotism.
the goodness can be egotistic. How dare they talk to me that way? I'm a good person. Whoa. Let's read this. This is number 2. You see this? He says, this type then is the sort of person who can't open himself to God, who can't trust in God. He ends up being that Christian who is doing fine, just fine, but deep down he feels it, he sees it. When he's paying attention, he still doesn't have communion with God. He still doesn't have contact with God. Oh, how's it going? Fine. Yeah, good. How's life? Good. When inside they're doing awful, but they you know what I mean? Hiding it, faking it. You know what I mean? I remember, I probably told this story. I was at St. Tikhon's and I was going to the altar, and the abbot. The abbot was like, "How's it going?" I'm like, "Thank God." Oh, no, it's my friend. Yeah, I go, "Thank God," and he goes, "That bad, huh?" You know what I mean? Meaning, like, when you would talk to people that are more real, it's like they're not gonna. When you ask them how they're doing, they're not gonna like divulge everything. But it's like, "Oh, how's it going?" What? We don't have to always say, "Yeah, things are great, jolly, great, wonderful, absolutely." Right? Because we're talking about real communion with God. The light of God hasn't come into this secret darkness that exists inside him, into this double locked shell of his. And he has a consciousness of this reality, but certain that he has it, but he may not have it. And sometimes one asks oneself, why, after all, while he believes up to a point, while he struggles to be a Christian, while he carries out a lot of Christian duties and wants to have communion with God, in the end, he doesn't have it. Well, I go to church, I fast, I pray, I do alms, but I don't feel close to God. See? He wonders why, or he wonders why he doesn't love other Christians, why he doesn't love other people. It's possible that the whole relationship between this, quote, good Christian and other people appears to be good and may be ongoing, but at depth, however, his existence has no communion with other people. You see, the Christian life is about authenticity. It's about genuineness. It's about other people, if we've noticed that. It's about loving other people, but listen to his definition. We're getting to a little definition of love here. And this Christian doesn't feel that the other existences pass into him and his own existence pass into the other existences. That's heavy, man. That's deep. Any thoughts on that? That's a wonderful way to live. Think about this. We want people to enter into our hearts. Well, I can't love so-and-so because of this. I can't love so-and-so because of that. No, we want everyone to be in our heart. As a priest, if I stand before the altar and I can't forgive or love someone, then it's an awful liturgy. I have to pray for everyone. I have to love everyone. I can't hold any grudges towards anyone. Any thoughts about that? He doesn't feel the other existences pass into him, and his own existence passes into the other existences. Yeah.
It's like he's describing the good person, like very legalistic or
Right.
cynical.
Right. I've got it all together. I look the part. But in reality, I'm isolated. I'm cut off. I don't have real relationships with other people. I play the part. I look the part. Life is too short to look the part. You know what I mean? Like, it's exhausting to try to look the part. You know?
The person, the biggest part is for. Find that person. Feels like the biggest part. You've heard that saying before. And you
Right.
feel like
Yes, that's number 4. Okay. So that's a great point. Okay. So love is not isolation. Love is not, you guys, I'm done with you. I always say this, and then whenever I say this, then this happens to me. It's not like, I'm never going to talk to that person. I'm going to befriend them on Facebook as though they never exist. You've probably heard that. Like, you don't exist to me. You're dead. You know what I mean? Like, people talk that way, meaning they've isolated themselves from that person. No, we don't want to isolate ourselves from anyone in our heart. The hermit will isolate themselves, but in order to be closer to people, okay? Then second, the good person plays the part. But we want to open up our heart, but the problem potentially is, what if we get hurt? Right? Which happens. So we bring people into our heart, and then someone, whatever hurts us. We're going to get into this, number 4, that's called dependence. So we don't want to be too dependent on other people, you see, that's a sneak preview. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Look, we all have this. All of them. We all have all of them. You know what I mean? So it's not like shame on you and all that. We all deal with this. But what we want to do is get to a place, which this is the way of the saint, this is the way of the church, this is the way of Christianity, is to bring everyone in our heart, but not be dependent on how they treat us. Which is very difficult, but it's freeing. It's freedom. This is freedom. And what I mean by that is, and we're going to see this in the interdependence, is that I'm in a bad mood if someone else is in a bad mood. I'm in a good mood when someone else is in a good mood. This means that we have a dependence on that person. So real love is, you can be in a bad mood. Go ahead. And it doesn't affect me. I give you the freedom to be in a bad mood. Because you love that person, but you're not dependent on their emotions. See? So listen to St. Justin Popovich, the bottom of whatever page that is. Divine love is an incarnating power. Okay, incarnation means it enters into that something. Incarnation. Carnis means flesh. It enfleshes itself. It transfers the one who loves into the one who is loved. This is love. Love, when it enters into us, it transfers the one who loves into the one who is loved. This is it. It makes him incarnate in him. Their lives are fused into one life, their souls into one soul, and their hearts into one heart. They feel that they are as one, although they stay two separate persons. See, this is what happens with God. This is the aim, is that you have God and you have me. His love enters into me, and we become one. We become one heart, one soul, one mind, one body. This is the church. They become incarnate, one in the other, one in all in one. They live one in the other, one in all in one. And also they think, feel, and work together commonly and with all the saints. This is what is written in the Acts of the Apostles. And the multitude of them that believed were of one heart and of one soul. Neither said any of them that aught of the things he possessed was his own, but they had all things in common. One heart, one soul. Can we be one heart, one soul with God? That's the aim. That's the aim. Christians don't feel deep down, says Archimandrite Simeon, because the love about which we spoke is absent, that they are really brothers, that they are really one human being, a human being who comes from the first Adam and from the second, Jesus Christ. We're all brothers. We're all brothers. We're all one human being. Any thoughts on that? So if I get angry at someone that I've never met before, I'm getting angry at myself. I'm getting angry at my brother. Please, if anyone has any comments or anything, please don't be shy. It says St. Justin Popovich, experiencing Christ's love, man settles God into his soul. Isn't that beautiful? Settles God into his soul and lives through him, thinks through him, feels through him, and works in him. Simply put, God dwells in us. Typo. This is salvation. This is the Orthodox Church. This is what we're after, for God to dwell in us, to feel through him, to think through him, to work through him, to live through him. That is why God is for man is the most immediate reality, the most clear test, the most empirical experience. When God dwells in man, he perfects his love. Then divine love emanating from God, that means being poured out from God, is poured upon the soul of man. It grows into a more perfect love through the rest of the holy virtues until it eventually recreates in love his entire being. Wow, that's amazing. That's what we're after. We're after God to pour out his love into our hearts, into our souls, into our minds, into our bodies, into our entire being, and to be recreated by his love. Therefore, the Christian life is not about the mind, it's not about reason, it's not just about feelings, it's about being recreated by the experience of his love. So first one, isolation. Second one, good person. So therefore, to break through being a good person, we have to experience God's love. Not warm and fuzzies. That's not God's love, but the Holy Spirit. Any other questions about that? Yeah. Right.
So we have to sacrifice that.
Yeah, well, that, yeah. Yeah, which is our ego. Right. Because the love that he has for people is, yes, his own, but more importantly, it's the grace of the Holy Spirit. If we try to love people on our own, we cannot do it. That's called ink blot tests. Do they still do that? Anyway, psychology is what I'm saying. Any other questions? Yeah, there was a hand over here. The third improper movement against love is anger. Moving against people. Says Elder Simeon. He's not canonized yet, but he may be. Others may belong to that type that considers everybody their enemy. He quarrels with everybody and can't discern in anybody a disposition of goodness or love, a disposition of cooperation. They were all his enemies. They were all dangerous. And he had to take a defensive position toward all of them. We've all experienced this, I'm sure. Right? So again, we have two movements, really. Isolation, moving away from people. And now we have moving against people. Says St. Maximus the Confessor, 7th century saint, probably one of the greatest saints in the history of the church. Beautiful, beautiful, wonderful human being. St. Maximus the Confessor. If love is long-suffering and kind, a man who is contentious and malicious clearly alienates himself from love. And he who is alienated from love is alienated from God, for God is love. If we move against people, there will always be an isolation from God. We say, well, where is God? I don't know where he is. Well, it's because we have moved against someone, and therefore we have separated ourselves from God. St. Maximus the Confessor, if we detect any trace of hatred in our hearts against any man whatsoever for committing any fault, we are utterly estranged from love for God, since love for God absolutely precludes us from hating any man. Whoa. I'm waiting for like a reaction here. That's pretty amazing. Say it again.
That hatred, you don't necessarily have hatred, you have emotion and feeling towards somebody, but you can get over them. You don't necessarily hate. In the moment, you may feel something.
Right.
But you don't necessarily have to hate that person.
Right. So there's a difference.
Feel it. Away from.
Right. So there's a differentiation between, okay, someone wrongs us. We will feel these emotions because we're not sanctified, right? We're being sanctified. We're in the process. Then we can isolate ourselves from the situation. We can pray for them, ask for forgiveness, ask for forgiveness before God, and try to develop that relationship in our heart. They may still be upset with us. It may not be perfect relationship, but at least we're going to try to do the inner work, is what we call it, the work of the heart. That's what I mean. Yeah.
What if you feel like you hate that somebody hates you?
And
that's hold that on.
Right. So that would be again our own passion, which we call it spiritual sickness, right? So one of my favorite quotes from my patron saint is that it's none of my business, he says, when people talk about me. Meaning, if people talk about you and you're walking by them, it's none of my business. See if we can get to a point where we're not dependent on people's thoughts about us. That's really freedom. Because if we say, boy, you have to think well of me, then we're trapped. Then we have to always appease them. That's exhausting. You try to appease someone over and over again, they're just always grumpy and despondent. There's no winning, so why even try? So in this case, that's kind of where, I think that's where that dependence, we want to kind of be drawn away from the unhealthy dependence, which means we get our love solely from God. Because if you think about this, if we put our trust in someone else for them to love us, to get our fulfillment of love, we're going to be disappointed almost all the time. Because they're not perfect, they're moody, they're going through bad days, and if our dependence is based on them, we're going to be upset. We talked about this in the second class on hope. If we put our dependence on the stock market, if we put our dependence on our job, if we put a dependence on anything that really fluctuates and changes, we're going to be unstable. So we have to put our heart and our trust on the only thing in the whole world, even that is beyond the world, which is stable, which is Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. Says St. Maximus. Again, I want us to understand this. If we detect any trace of hatred in our hearts against any man whatsoever for committing any fault, that's crazy talk, isn't it? That's so extreme. That person robbed a Twinkie, stole a Twinkie from the Quickie Mart. I can't believe he did that. Why would he do such a thing? Blah, 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 blah. He says, for any fault, if we have hatred in our hearts against any man whatsoever, for any fault, we're utterly estranged from God. So the aim is to not hate anyone for any reason in our hearts. So St. Maximus, if love is the fulfilling of the law, right? The Old Testament law is fulfilled in love. He who is full of rancor towards his neighbor and lays traps for him and curses him, exulting in his fall, must surely be a transgressor deserving eternal punishment. Feel free to speak about if any of this is shocking. If love prevents us from harming our neighbors, says St. Maximus, he who is jealous of his brother or irritated by his reputation and damages his good name with cheap jibes or in any way spitefully plots against him is surely alienating himself from love and is guilty in the face of eternal judgment. Wow, if we put anyone down with cheap jibes or spitefully plot against anyone, then we are alienating ourselves from love.
I mean, that's very hard, like, I could see that in the church community, especially in like ancient Israel, but how, like, a capitalist culture where we're in a business war with our neighbor, like how, like, is there any guidance to that, and like the amount of conspiracies that go on throughout history, like how do we interact with that and still have bread on the table and still work?
So Proverbs, right, says, basically I'm paraphrasing, but blessed is the man who is righteous and is poor versus the man that is unrighteous and is rich. So it's better to do it through the straight and narrow, not to kind of cut corners or try to get ahead through improper means, but to be as honest and squeaky clean in our conscience and in our virtues in work as possible. And if we go the straight and narrow, God will provide. He will provide. He can feed someone through ravens. We saw this in the Old Testament. If we're hungry, he will send a raven with food. And God will always provide. Look, the sparrows of the field, the flowers, the lilies of the field, the birds, he feeds them. He cares for us more than he cares for them. So he feeds the birds and he cares for the flowers. He will certainly care for us. So you see how doing our job with integrity and with, virtue is actually trust in God. Because if I do my work just, on the straight and narrow and I get fired, then God will take care of me. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, if we do our work unto God for his glory, he will take care of us. I'm telling you, I've seen this time and time and time again. God will send money, or God will send this, or God will do this. He will always, food is like easy for him. Shelter is easy for him. It'll happen. So we just got to be perseverant. We got to try to, like I said, pursue love, and he will do it. Now, there are saints that actually choose to live in caves and not to have shelter, not to have food, like we saw in Mount Athos, where they ate on figs. So they chose that life because it's not all about just making money, but although God will provide. What does he say? I've never seen a righteous man begging bread. That's true. That's true. So this is where we talked about in the first class. If God said that, then let's do it. God says, I've never seen the righteous begging bread. So let's pursue holiness and righteousness, and God will take care of us. Any other questions? St. Justin Popovich. I'll paraphrase this. The first commandment and the second commandment are one. The first commandment is love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. But I don't understand, Father. You said in the first class we're supposed to hate ourselves. What is it? You don't make any sense. We're supposed to hate ourselves? We're supposed to love ourselves. Okay, this is very important. This distinction. St. Macarius basically says there's two distinctions here. There's our sin, there's our passions, and then there's our soul made in the image of God. When we hate ourselves, we're supposed to hate our sin, hate our passions, but we're not supposed to hate our soul. We're not supposed to hate, the image of God within us, our worth. Man is so elevated, so high in the eyes of God. We're not supposed to hate that aspect. Any questions on that? This is very important because some people like to hate themselves so much that they see no worth in themselves at all. And then that leads to despair and to despondency and to suicide. Man is made so great, a little lower than the angels, it says in Psalms. But man was to be king over all creation. All creation experienced God through man. This is how important man's role was, and he fell. He messed up big time. So as man goes, so the whole world goes. Right? This is how important man is. And in fact, St. Sophrony says, if we understood how magnificent man is, we would not have wars, we would not have problems in the home, we would not have problems in society. Everyone would just live as brothers, and we would live happily ever after. If we really understood how magnificent man is, right? He's not just a robot. He's not just an object. He's not just an ape. Man is made with the breath of God. Any comments or questions on that? I want to make sure we understand that. So if we were to love others as ourselves, we're not loving others because of our sins and our passions, because we hate our sins and we hate our passions, but we love the soul that God has given us. What is more valuable than the soul, says Christ? What if you gain the whole world, but you lost your own soul? Right? The soul is the most valuable thing that we have. All right, so we go hungry for a few weeks. We still have our soul. Right? The purification, the sanctification of the soul is what we love. And we love to see God working in our soul. And then we want to love other people as God is working in us. See how that works?
What is the significance of being lower than the angel?
Yes, a man is made a little lower than the angel. Okay. This is very important to understand our anthropology. Okay. We have the Holy Trinity. Nothing greater than the Holy Trinity. Obviously, we got that Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We can't even say enough. Okay. We'll talk about the Holy Trinity in a later class. Then we have the created angels. A third of them fell, and the other 2/3 stayed with Archangel Michael, and those are the good angels. Now, these are bodiless beings, right? These are spiritual beings. Then you have man. And man is made up of a body and a soul, and the soul has a spiritual component to it. Then you have animals. Animals, they have souls. The difference is that man has a soul made in the image of God. The animals do not. Only man has the inbreathing by God into the soul. So when we say soul, we're going to use Aristotle's definition a little bit, not fully, but that basically the soul is that which moves the body. Okay, so the animals have something that moves the body. Then from there you have vegetative life, plants and animals, and then that's probably also includes dirt. Okay, but if you look at this, look how man is made up of a body and a soul. The soul is akin to the angels because it's spiritual. And the body, the material, is akin to the rest of the earth. Only man has both the spiritual component and the material component in one. Therefore, only man can combine the spiritual and the material in his very being. This is why it's very important. Man was to lift up all of creation to God. He's the only one that could do that because he has a body. But he failed. See, this is the significance of man being made just a little lower than the angels, because in him you have both the spiritual and you have the physical. This is how important man is. Man is so important. Only man could do what he was called to do. Adam fell, but Christ came as the second Adam and redeemed the entire world. He also redeemed the angels, because remember, his soul is like the angels. One of my favorite topics. So the fourth movement, this is on page whatever, is getting tangled up with other personalities. So we have three movements we talked about: isolating ourselves from others, not opening ourselves up, right? Trying to be a good person and hiding behind our morality. Second movement, really, or a third movement, is moving against others. Now we're getting tangled up with others. That's the dependence. Says Elder Simeon, and some may belong to that type of person who is attached to others, who depends on others, and who can't live without this dependence. Everything is lost for him if, let's suppose, he remains without dependence. Any questions about that? I want to make sure we clarify, or make sure this is less unclear. So in a state of nirvana, or Neoplatonism, people are familiar, the aim of human existence is to become one with all the rest of the sea of humanity and to lose yourself. We see this in political movements. We see this in other clubs. We see this in gangs. You become one of us. When you become one of us, you lose yourself. You lose your wills, you lose your motivations, you lose your own individual personality. Your identity now becomes about us, about the gang, or about whatever it is, the political ideology. No, we don't lose our individual personality. According to the gospel, says Elder Simeon, according to Orthodox Christian teaching, man is forever a distinct being, and only a distinct being can love and accept love. True love never identifies us with the other, but neither does it ever distance us from the other. Okay, this is the dependence. Let's talk about this. Any questions about dependence? So dependence, right? Dependence is like, someone says, you got to do this, you have to do this, you have to, you just have to, you have to, blah, 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 blah. Okay, don't hurt me. We need their approval. We need their love. We need their support. And we have to feel like we have to be a certain way in order to get their love, in order to get their support. We have to fit in with their way of how we're supposed to be. That's exhausting. So the aim is how can you be your own person, still love the person, and be able to say no? See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? I want you to do this thing, that thing. Nope, sorry, can't do it. Any thoughts? Let's make this concrete. You know, I don't want this to make this just theoretical. We see this in our own lives, yeah. They open themselves up too much. Right. So that's the balance. It's not really a balance. It's a bad word. Well, the question is, how can you love with such an open heart where you love absolutely everyone? Isn't that a wonderful life? That's the Christian life. Just letting you know, what is Orthodox Christianity? Love every single person with as much heart as you can all the time. No. But then the question is what about protect yourself? No? Elder Simeon says to protect ourselves is really the ego. Because look at Christ. He opened up so wide and yet he was crucified. Is this easy? No, is this irrational? Yeah, it seems like it.
But
Uh-huh.
after their life, never and why somebody. It's not reciprocal. It's not acting bad or wrong things.
Mhm.
They never understand why.
Mhm.
I think that's hard for some or a lot of people to take in.
Right.
You never know.
And that's okay.
You don't understand, but understand what
And in fact, that's okay. Because if we love them for a reward, meaning if we love them so that they can love us, or we love them so we can get a reaction from them, then that's not real love. Right. This is why having a clean conscience is good. This is what the church does. The church basically says, you know, you're going forward and you're trying to love, and people are, you know, whatever, this, that, blah, 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 blah. And the church is saying, just keep going, just ignore it. Just keep going, just ignore it. Don't pay attention to that. They're trying to get you there, trying to get you there. Just ask for forgiveness and just keep staying on the straight and narrow. Ah, blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? The church gives us that support to be able to not be as affected by other people's craziness. Go ahead, keep going, keep going. No, no, it's good. This is very good. Any other comments on this? Let's want to address Casey's question of how do we not get hurt? This goes back into the second class, which was a couple weeks ago, which has to do with suffering. How can we not get hurt from other people? Suffering, we turn the suffering that we experience from other people, and we turn that into prayer for them, and we turn that into love. That's it. There's no other way, because what's the other option? Isolate from them. I'm not talking to them ever. I'm not even going to think about them, or move against them, attack them. That's not the solution either. But the solution is to go through it like Christ. Remember last time we had that chart, you just go through it. You ask God to be with you. You ask God to help you with the suffering because he went through the same thing on the cross. And you ask, what did Christ do? Remember when he's on the cross? Forgive them for they do not know what they do. You forgive them. You ask God to forgive them. You ask that every good thing come upon them. You ask God to bless them spiritually and materially. You want all good things to happen to them. You pray for them and you love them. And what happens is it turns the suffering into joy. That seems to be crazy. This is how this works. It says, for the joy set before him, Christ went to the cross. When Christ was crucified, he actually had joy in the midst of the cross because of his great love. You see, the greater the love, the greater the suffering, says Elder Silouan, Saint Silouan. Any other questions on this? This is very good. I want to make sure we understand this. So we want to open our heart, but sometimes when we open our heart, we're too dependent on other people. So we'll say, I'll open my heart, but please love me in return, you know? So we want to get to a place which is very difficult, but is our lifelong struggle. Is I'm going to love you no matter what it is, no matter how you treat me. But we're not going to put in ourselves where we can be abused, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about, I'm going to love you. You can treat me however you want, but I'm still my own person. I can still say no. I can still have a boundary, right? But I'm still going to love you, and you can be free to love me or hate me. That's the love of Christ. That's the love of God. Does everyone love God? No. People hate God. Does that affect him? How many people hate God? Yeah. Excellent.
Like thoughts. That
Yes.
are like,
Yes.
we can take them captive.
Yes.
Here- here.
Yes.
So when somebody does something to us, we have then choices as well. That we face them with. We can choose.
Yep.
That suffering. Like getting reacting to it, or we can say, Lord, have mercy, and what do you want me to do?
Yeah. So the suffering will come voluntarily or involuntarily, right? That the pain, the emotional pain will come no matter what. We'll experience that. But then at that moment, we can either stay in that pain, seek revenge, seek isolation. But if we choose love and prayer, that's really the medicine that will help the soul. Very difficult to do that because the energy is so strong sometimes in either direction. Isolation. Exactly. Oh yeah, it goes up and absolutely it goes up and down. But the energy, we're going to talk about this tomorrow for the gospel, but the energy that has the most impact in our lives and in the whole world is to then turn that into love. Loving our enemies, which is very difficult and can only be done with God. So we have to then turn that energy into prayer. We say, Lord, save them. Lord, help them. Lord, let nothing bad happen to them. Don't hold this accountable to them on the day of judgment. See what I'm saying? We want to cover them. We don't want to say, God, go get them, go smite them. No, that's God, don't do any bad to them at all. Is this otherworldly? Yes, you better believe it is. You see, this is love because God does that to us. If he struck us with a lightning bolt, every time we were rebellious towards him, we'd be dead more times than a cat. You know what I mean? God is merciful to us. God is long-suffering to us. God is patient with us. He didn't smite us when we're in the midst of sin. You know, I mean, this all makes sense, but in the midst of it, when the emotions are high, we just have to turn those emotions into prayer. That's the solution. So, where do we begin? Please.
Where my mother got it from the other day, so it's kind of like, got it from somebody who offered something already been stated from somebody else. But she told me you have to go through it. That touched me. So I don't know if that'll help anybody else, but that.
So let's put that in the context of what we're talking about. If you're going through suffering, again, you can either isolate or you can go against the person, which we talked about are not healthy options, or we can be dependent on that person. But if we go through the emotions, and when I say go through it, we mean the hard emotions. That's what we're talking about. Or the mental confusion. But we don't want to just go through it. It's not a bad saying, but we maybe add something. You have to go through it. What was it? You have to go through it to get through it, right? But the only person that has really gone through it is Christ. So he has gone through it. He's gone through the suffering. So we need to go through it with him. If not, then we're just relying on our own feeble powers to go through it, which is very sad, you know? It doesn't work for me. Maybe it works for you, but it doesn't work for me. But if we go through it with Christ, meaning with prayer, then that's the best way. So where do we begin? The very last quote. It's as difficult for granite to melt from an ordinary fire as for this situation to be resolved by ordinary efforts. In order for granite to melt, it requires a very high temperature. And in order for this situation to go away, for this wall to melt and the soul to open, it requires, to be sure, a great temperature of faith. You see, we want the soul to open. What is required, first of all, I think, is for one to understand things in this way, to see them in this way, to accept that this is how things are, and to make a decision about this granite, this rock, this hardness that has been established inside him, in which distances his soul from God and from people. Listen to what he says. Here is the solution: to set it down into God's fire. So I have this granite inside of me. I have this hard heart. I have this closed shell. I have my isolation. I have my movements against someone. I have my dependence, unhealthy dependence. But I want to set my soul down into God's fire. But as soon as one understands it, he must say, whether I want to or not, it has to happen. There's the ticket. That's the first move. My soul is closed. My soul is isolated. I don't love people the way that I want to, but it has to happen. I have no choice. I mean, I do have a choice. You see, what does he say? Whether I want to or not, it has to happen. But I don't feel like loving that person. I don't feel like, praying for that person. Whether I want to or not, it has to happen. But I hate that person. Blah, blah, blah. Whether I want to or not, it has to happen. And if he begins acting in that way, sooner or later, God's fire will melt this hardness. God will enter his soul. Heaven will open, and he will become a Christian and will taste this new life. Then he won't just hear about Christianity and the Christian life, but he'll know within him more fully what Christian means and how a Christian lives. So where do we begin? Again, we must have God enter our heart, enter our soul, enter our being. We have a choice, like I said before, but we really have no choice. It has to happen. I can't live in this isolated closed shell. I can't live in this bubble. I can't live in my hatred towards someone or my unhealthy dependence towards someone or whatever. I can't do it. Something has to happen. And we beseech God constantly in prayer, and God will enter the soul. Heaven will open, he says, and we will taste a new life. It's true. It's true. Undoubtedly, it's true. Any questions, please? Comments? Wow. Nathan, did you have your hand up? Swat the fly. That's okay.
When you're on an airplane, you tell you to give yourself the oxygen first, so you
Right.
help somebody else.
Right.
So help yourself first.
Definitely.
Make sure you're good, so you give that to somebody else as well, otherwise you're no good to them.
Yeah, Christ says this in a similar way. He says, the blind leading the blind. So if we're blind, we're leading the blind, it's like we're gonna get nowhere. We're just gonna run in circles. And then secondly, I forget the other example, but yeah, that's right. Oh, physician, heal thyself, he says. So we want to heal ourselves first. And then others around you will be saved. This is what Saint Seraphim of Sarov says, acquire spirit of peace, and 1,000 around you will be saved. So the aim is not to go out and just say, you must we must, accept Christ and whatever. It's let's focus on our heart, our soul, and then naturally it'll flow out. People will be saved, but it starts with us. Anything else? Any questions? Thoughts? Confusions? Did we answer your question? Yeah. Because even in marriage, let's take marriage, right? It's like you want to have the biggest heart, but there's times where your spouse has a bad day, So you got to kind of have your heart open, but then when your spouse has a bad day, it not be able to dictate the course of your day. It's like, all right, great, you have a bad day, go to the spa, go get your nails done, go play Australian football or whatever, just go out and the best piece of advice I was ever given in my whole life, I've said this before, is when your wife is in a bad mood, don't pray that it changes. Wow. So that means you give people so much freedom to just be however they are. One elder said, I have no expectations on anyone and I'm as happy as can be. It's so simple, but it's like, but if we say you have to be this way, you have to act this way around me, it would drive my wife crazy. Machushka, if I told you you had to be a certain way, act a certain way, feel a certain way, how would you react to that? Now I'm far from perfect at this, but that's the path. That's the path. Is you're free to feel how you want, act how you want, and if you need to blow off steam, then go paint or something. That's
Freedom is freedom. It's cute, but I guess it's like.
So that's how we overcome the interdependence, is that you're free to be whoever you are because I have my value, my worth in Christ. God bless you all. Go on the Foundation's website, Catechism, Foundations, Living the Holy Orthodox Faith. Watch the movie. Yeah.
I was like a quarter inch. But
Yeah.
I was started to cry.
Yeah.
What how do you what?
You see how humble and how gentle and meek Christian life is, So watch that, Man of God, and then read this. If you don't have one of these, The Way into the Kingdom, read it once, twice. Very simple reading, but very good. And then you can begin reading The Faith We Hold. You can get this very small. You can read it very quickly. I don't know. Maybe our bookstore, maybe online, but online, I've recorded the first chapters. I've read them, I read them and record them. So you can listen to that. It's on the course website. So you can listen to me reading them about the first half, which is probably good. So you can even just read the first half. It's called The Faith We Hold. Yeah, very simple, but very, very good as well. So these two books, The Indication of the Way into the Kingdom, and then The Faith We Hold, these two books. Read those and then watch The Man of God. If you haven't seen it in a while, then watch it again. And notice how, I'll just end here because we have to go up to Vespers, but some people ask, why was he canonized? Saint Nectarios, because of his love for enemies. I mean, you saw that.
Maybe I missed it.
Huh?
Why was he told to leave Egypt? What was it? Because he never knew why they told him.
Right, because he was slandered, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I missed it in there. That's fine.
It might be in his biography. There's a biography. So you can always read that. Gives more detail into his life. But usually holy people are slandered. So they didn't do anything, they just, people are jealous, so they make up things about them. So I'm not sure exactly the detail, but for whatever reason, people made up lies and slandered him, and he took it. Took it. So watch that. You'll be amazed, especially when he, like, remember when he talks about the punishment of the two boys in the seminary, and they're fighting with each other, and he says, "Okay, I have no option but to punish myself."
No,
And he doesn't eat until they, he fasts until they work it out.
that was that. Other guy. That's the guy that said, well, why are you going against my? So he's punishing those boys,
Yeah,
and he has
Oh,
that one guy, why did you go against what I'm doing? Well, we
Right.
don't like the way.
right, exactly. See, the Christian life is the exact opposite. The world's not gonna like it. So, okay, next week we will not meet, but in 2 weeks we will meet. This is how the schedule works, so every other week at least for now. Do some readings, do some prayer, keep going, practice the virtues. That's the way forward. Otherwise, you're gonna get burnt out and the devil's gonna have a field day. Practice faith, hope, and love. Just practice them, whether we feel like it or not. We have no choice, whatever. Just God, increase my faith. Lord, give me love for people. Whatever it is that you want, just ask God for it continually, and He will give it to you in due time. Okay, let's pray. It is truly mutual, ever blessed and most pure, and the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without defilement you gave birth to God the Word, through Theotokos we magnify. God bless you all. Thank you, everyone. God bless you.